Hello and welcome to today's webinar entitled Orchestrating an Effective Operating Model for Business Process Transformation, brought to you by the PEX Network and LTI. My name is Andrea Charles, Senior Editor for the PEX Network, www.pexnetwork.com. Please remember that this is an interactive webinar, so feel free to ask your questions at any time via your Q&A chat box. I'm now delighted to introduce your speakers. John Wilmot is CEO of NelsonHall, the leading outsourcing research and analysis firm, and is widely regarded as one of the world's leading authorities on business process services. Mahesh Parab is Head of Delivery for RPA at LTI. Mahesh leads robotics process automation delivery. He has 16 plus years experience with around 3 years of RPA experience and has delivered some of the largest implementations in the world using RPA and cognitive automation. We're delighted to welcome you both. John, when you're ready, please begin.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Good morning and afternoon, everyone, from Mahesh and myself. I'd like to start by handing over to Mahesh, who has got vast experience, as Andrea's just said, in actually doing RPA for real. I'd like to hand over to Mahesh to address how RPA and BPA are evolving and the challenges that organisations have faced in RPA adoption. So Mahesh, over to you.
Hey, thanks, John. Thanks for that quick introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. To start with, we'll go with overall the RPA maturity. John, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So to start with, let's have a look at the way RPA as a concept, it's maturing into the industry. As a concept, as automation as a concept, it's not a new concept. It's a revolving over the period with the idea of removing the capability of mundane and monotonous tasks. As everyone can see on the screen, it started with all manual operation where we had big human tasks handling large operations into multiple different industries. And the basic automation started with the script-based automation, or you call a macro-based automation, that eventually progressed into a script of script, so called as a master script, calling multiple subscript and confusing the automation into next layer. To handle the challenges of script-based automation, there is the new concept augmented called as a robotic process automation, for which we are currently talking about. The robotic process automation, again, as a concept divided into a multiple layer. It started with a very simple assisted RPA, or in some areas we call it a robotic desktop automation, where tool like OpenSpan or a macro-based, a simple automation started delivering the partial automation. For example, if I am on a call with my customer in operation field, and if I need a quick details about a customer, I may trigger a robot on my machine or a macro on my machine, and that will give me the assisted output. That is RPA, assisted, the stage which RPA started with. Over the period, we understand that there was a need of much larger RPA, into the enterprise, and there the non-assisted RPA, or so-called the full-fledged RPA, kicked in. Obviously, the full-fledged RPA which run into enterprise has a much more advantages, much more benefit, which brings down to the table. To start with, it covers end-to-end automation, which means pretty much you are talking about straight-through processing, where you start the robot and you just wait for the output and look at the output. So it's end-to-end automation, no human interaction required there. It is completely scalable. With my experience, we have seen robots scaling from 10 to 15 to 1,000 robots with a single click, during the peakers. So it is very much scalable, and you can manage that scale with a few minutes, settings. You don't have to code for it. It's very easy to deploy. It has a centralized, so-called a control room, or a room from where you can manage 1,000 robots at a one click, as I mentioned. It also provides you performance analytics or dashboards to look at the robotic performance down in the operation. And obviously, along with those, there are many other benefits RPA brings onto the table. I mean, obviously, there are some challenges or some limitation with respect to only RPA. Typically, unstructured data is the challenge where robotics, purely robotics cannot handle, and that's where we are going into the next stage, which is a cognitive automation, or it's slowly merging into RPA autonomous, where we are talking about how can we embed NLP, artificial intelligence, machine learning along with robotics. And as we are seeing the way the RPA is growing, in parallel RPA products, different RPA vendors which are available, they are also maturing. You started seeing more cognitive features embedded into a products like Automation Anywhere launching IQ bots. WorkFusion already had MI and machine intelligence along with them. Blue Prism partnership with the machine learning industry. Same time when we are talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, another very important part get embedded into RPA is OCR. Almost all products started embedding OCR into it. That's what we are calling it as a digital technology merging with RPA. We started seeing biggest acquisition into RPA firm as well. Recent many big firms started acquiring smaller machine learning automation anywhere type of entities. We started seeing the BPM giants acquiring a smaller robotic firm and calling it as a more process automation into industry. We also saw a disruptor where a free RPA Express launched by one of the RPA vendors. So over the period, RPA is really maturing from a really script-based, a simple automation towards cognitive automation. So many more to come. I will say this is a start, and we will see a much more mature RPA journey down the line. So John, can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So this current slide talks about overall RPA market. As you can see on the screen, we are referring to few experts into the analyst firms who have given their research analysis. Just to highlight few points. One is, as everyone knows, it started with a BFSI as a core segment, but over the period we have seen overall RPA has picked up into almost all all organizations. To name few, it has picked up well in healthcare. It has picked up very well into a manufacturing, specifically in supply chain area where lots of supply chain processing, in order creation, invoice processing, all those human-based activities are involved. RPA is picking up there, and down the line, it is also going to involve lots of other areas as well. If you can look at the graph down the line there, in 2024 we will see a huge potential of RPA. And if you look at the spread of the RPA, almost it is equal. Obviously, it will dominate BFSI and the IT to start with, but it will equally spread across retail, healthcare, and manufacturing as an industry. One of the interesting trend or analysis also shows that RPA will not only limit to the human mimicking automation. As I mentioned in my previous slide where RPA is maturing, that is also analysis proves that over the period, RPA will move towards more into a cognitive world, and it will become a more intelligent RPA or intelligent automation down the line. That's what Gartner or McKinsey are talking about, and obviously the number of dollars spent on the RPA will be humongous. I mean, it's just a start, as I mentioned. We are into 2017, and by 2024, we will see huge demand of RPA, huge benefit delivered. By that time, there will be lots of learning, lots of success in the industry, lots of how to improve the RPA benefit will come into the market as well. So we are looking forward for this success over the period. So with that, I'd like to move to the next slide, John. Yeah, one more slide, please. So we have seen the way RPA is matured. We have seen what market is saying. The current slide, which I'm going to talk about, it is completely based on our experience. We have spent more than 3 to 4 years now into RPA. We have seen one of the biggest implementation in the world. We have seen success. We have seen some challenges as well. So I like to categorize overall challenges into 3 areas. To start with, one is organization agility. Second is process suitability. And very third one is the system environment availability, or more to gel with how to integrate IT in your RPA journey. So if I start with the organization agility as one of the area where typical challenges which we have seen is a dedicated team for RPA journey. Typically, people start RPA with a pilot, but we are not seeing a complete COE getting created for RPA. So that's my first point, where lack of committed team to drive the inception to the closure. and that is the reason most of the RPA journey stops after the POC. That also linked to the the third bullet point, where there is no dedicated funding or pool available or automation. Like I said, when I said dedicated pool, I'm talking about pool of money and pool of human resources or the dedicated resources as well. So you may have to have a dedicated team who can work with them. The very important point which we see in operation is resistance from the people on ground, obviously because of the misconception of RPA taking away the jobs, or RPA may not work, or RPA may not deliver up to the mark. So that is one of the resistance which we are seeing, which will bring down the confidence for the future journey. And again, your RPA might stop at the POC level. And last but not the least, very important point, the expectation from the RPA. Typically, the RPA is compared with IT projects and started putting expectation that RPA should deliver 100% accuracy on one first day, or cognitive automation should deliver me 100% accuracy on the first day. That's not the one you should expect from RPA on the day one. So those becomes my organization challenges. I'm sure in upcoming slide John is going to address how to take care or how to mitigate those challenges. So let me cover few challenges before I hand it over to John. So another one very important, when I move from once you set up your team properly, you handle organization agility proper, then you move into the next stage where discovery of processes or choosing right processes for the automation start. That where the process suitability, where typically undocumented process goes into RPA, and we typically struggle to deliver RPA where we don't know how that process should work. So very important to have a documented processes. Second very important point, we see lots of variation into process. When you ask operation team, they might talk about 3 or 4 variation, and when you move into RPA into production, you may see a couple of more variations. So getting right data, right information about process is very important, and choosing right process is a key success factor for RPA. With that, if I move to the last and very important sector, how to integrate IT or how to get system environment. So typical challenges which we see, data is the driver factor of RPA. If you can train the robot how that data should flow for the various combination, robot will give you smart output. So non-availability of right data or no data becomes a challenge. Lengthy processes for providing system access is another challenge. When I say system access, typically question is asked how to get access to the robot. Today I have a team and they have all accesses, but do I really have to create a new user? Do I really have to replicate all the accesses? Will I really have to worry about something more when I give access to robot? Will robot play with my security challenges or not? That is another challenges. And as everyone understands that RPA is a totally non-intrusive solution, which means I'm totally dependent on my application, the way application behaves. So another challenge which we have seen in the industry, a typical change in behavior of the application without notifying the RPA or the COE or the team. And so robo will obviously say, hey, I don't know the screen because I never seen this screen. So frequent application changes can also put a hurdle for my journey. And obviously the last and the important one is the licensing and infrastructure. As everyone knows, down the line, the licensing, robot license is very important. So making sure that all the infrastructure and third-party system access and the licenses are available make a very good movement to take your robotics into bigger way. So again, to summarize these challenges, these are the key one. Obviously down the line you will see other smaller challenges which will get addressed over the RPA journey. But if you can focus on these 3 areas specifically, organization agility, process suitability, and system environment availability, RPA is a success for you. With that, I'd like to hand it over to John, who will take over this challenge in its more structured way and talk about how to adopt an operating model framework. Over to John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahesh. So as Mahesh says, I'd like to take a look at really how you address some of those challenges that Mahesh has just identified. And so really split this into 3 areas. So firstly, let's look at and establish an RPA operating model framework. The experience of users so far has shown that organizations that just dive into RPA without establishing a solid framework tend to encounter difficulties downstream. Yes, you can do a pilot, but if you actually want solid enterprise adoption and something consistent and not chaos across the organization, then you need a solid RPA operating model framework. Secondly, let's consider a few best practices for successful implementation, covering the various stages in the RPA lifecycle. So we'll look at need assessment and opportunity identification, design and implementation, and then production, maintenance and support. And thirdly, one of the key issues so far in RPA adoption has been cooperation between operations and IT execs and personnel. So let's consider some guidelines for the roles of operations and IT across the various stages of the RPA lifecycle. And then finally, we'll do a quick summary of RPA best practice. So let's start with the RPA operating model framework. And there are really two key aspects to this: establishing an RPA Centre of Excellence and establishing a governance framework. So overall, the COE needs to be that central source of best practice for application of RPA across process and business units, so that you've got corporate consistency and the best practice, the best knowledge in the organisation is being rolled consistently. COA needs to take responsibility really for the standards, the controls, the product release management. So they're just making sure that technically everything's consistent. Otherwise you do get a certain amount of organisational chaos if everyone's doing it in different ways. So who should run the RPA COE? I mean, RPA is essentially an operations initiative, and so the RPA Centre of Excellence needs to be largely operations-led, and also it's important to align it with our other operations-led process operations improvements groups. So you want it to be working with and closely with any continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, process re-engineering groups of that type. They all need to be working in tandem towards a common goal of improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the process. However, it's important, even though this is operations-led, you need one or more representatives from IT in the RPA COE, both to support the initiatives and to maintain cooperation with IT as RPA implementations are rolled out. You really do need the support of IT both proactively and reactively if you're going to make RPA work. In terms of governance, there are really three key elements. Firstly, you need a business unit governance council to prioritise and schedule the rollout of RPA projects across the various departments and business units. Secondly, you need someone who's actually monitoring how effectively RPA is taking place. So you need a group that targets for RPA business outcomes. So you're setting targets for what you're going to do in terms of efficiency gains or turnaround times or whatever, and you're going to track the efficiency of the projects and their outcomes and effectiveness. So you need a group that does that. And thirdly, as we've already discussed, as part of the COE, really a technical group that's maintaining the standards, the guidelines, the best practices, knows how your organisation is going about RPA and is largely keeping people compliant with that. So, okay, so we've set up, a good framework for actually being able to do enterprise rollout of RPA. What actually makes for a successful RPA implementation? So let's start with stakeholder communication and opportunity identification. And you probably get sick of people saying this to you on every topic you hear, but as with any project, stakeholder communication and change management is critical success. Communication and change management, no matter what the project, are critical. So nothing new here, except that RPA is a relatively unknown and potentially scary topic, certainly at the start, and so communication becomes even more important. So having the backing, you need the backing and enthusiasm of a senior sponsor. To get it going, you need someone right at the top who's saying, we're going to do it. Organisations then need a communication plan for getting buy-in across the organisation, right from the C-suite down through the middle management and employees. Now, the business unit and middle management tend to be particularly concerned with any impact on their autonomy an ability to run operations, the impact on their staff, the impact on their budget, who's going to pay for this, how they will be charged, and will they be charged for something outside their control. So you need to address those types of issues in communicating with them. And with employees, messaging will probably be centered around showing them how RPA will take away some of the drudgery from their roles. And the key message really is showing how it will enable the organization to handle business growth without a major increase in headcount. So far, certainly at the start, most RPA deployments, you can deploy people to higher value tasks. So, the message is that you're improving the current staff roles, but you're just taking on less people to handle more in the future. And actually doing this at communication, because believe it or not, there still are people who think bots in an RPA sense have got mechanical arms and legs. Videos and workshops tend to be much more effective than written papers. Show them what it looks like. That tends to work well. So how do you then assess and prioritize projects for RPA implementation? Well, predictably enough, again, nothing new, the organization needs to have a formal framework for project selection. These tend to vary from organization to organization, but important factors are, again, the level of executive sponsorship. Don't start with an early project if the person you're doing it for is not enthusiastic about it. So you need decent executive sponsorship. You need it actually at the start as well. The ease of doing the project is important. Don't take on anything too ambitious. Are we reasonably confident we can do this? Okay, let's go with it. So those tend to be soft factors that are important, as well as the more obvious hard factors, such as levels of FTE savings and return on investment. I think Mahesh alluded to this very strongly up front, but it really makes a massive difference if the process is chosen as stable and well understood. So start with stable rule-based processes with strong standard operating procedures. There will probably be things that appear that, that were unknowns, but you really want something where you know as much about the process as possible. And also RPA is typically, it's operating off the user interface. So stable applications with no planned changes in the user interface also makes life much easier. And this is one of the key areas where communication with IT application owners is really critical. If the application is going to change, then you need to know about it. And if there's a significant change there, actually don't go near it with RPA at that time. Wait till it's stable again. So what about the design and development phase? Here we've put together 6 elements of best practice and some suggestions that might help. Firstly, as always with new technologies, it's important to address the business problem. So while you may want to keep initial RPA projects relatively simple, not overcomplicate things that we just discussed, actually eliminating an unnecessary process is always better than automating it. So to the extent that you can without overcomplicating things, thinking eliminate, simplify, standardize, then automate is actually a pretty good approach. Having said that, in the early stages of RPA adoption, it's important to achieve quick wins, which means you don't have to do a perfect implementation every time. At the start, if you're at the start of the RPA journey, people are learning. Don't bother about going for perfection. Get quick wins. Be prepared to go back and improve the implementation at a later date. The beauty of RPA is that it is relatively, compared to a lot of traditional IT, a lot of traditional process improvement projects, it's relatively quick and relatively low cost to do. So get some quick wins, prepare to go back and improve it later if you need to. One issue with initial RPA implementations is that they can be very fragmented. So a lot of processes as they may initially stand tend to be a people process, then followed by an RPA process, then followed by a people step, then by an RPA step. And this can go on and on. So it can get quite fragmented. So what we've found is organizations start to move up that maturity model that Mahesh was talking about earlier and get more familiar with RPA, then they start to do minor re-engineering. So you start to group the RPA processes together and the people processes together, and then you can do, say, all the people part up front and let the RPA run at it, or the other way around, you can do lots of RPA stuff up front and then have people sorting out the exceptions downstream. The more grouping you can do, then you tend to get greater improvements in turnaround time and efficiency. Next point is a key reason for operations building a good relationship with IT well in advance of implementation. Not only do you need to know about planned application changes, because they can play havoc with your RPA implementations, but actual access to applications, as Mahesh said, actual access to the applications can sometimes be a hurdle. And one great principle we've heard here talking to people who've gone through RPA implementations is that change management works both ways. So operations might be thinking, you know, why aren't IT keeping us informed? Similarly, IT tend to be thinking, why aren't operations keeping us informed? So change management works both ways, and both sides need to be talking to each other about what they're planning to do in the future, as well as expecting cooperation. Obviously, if you have an RPA Centre of Excellence, and we certainly encourage you to do so, then that facilitates building up a common bot library for common repeatable tasks. And finally, testing of bots can be interesting because operating off a user interface means that things like application response times come into play. So testing ideally needs to be done on something as close to the production environment as can be practically achieved. Now, it's not always possible to take a copy of the production environment, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I do know people who actually do test RPA actually on that live production environment. Perhaps depends a bit on your organization for that, but you need something that's going to be a pretty real operations environment rather than a theoretical test environment. With an RPA these days, it's increasingly easy to use a bot license to run multiple artifacts. And so it's important to centralize the scheduling, running and monitoring of bots within the operations team. Indeed, what a number of organizations have found, it makes scheduling and reporting much easier if bots are treated in a similar manner to FTEs for monitoring, scheduling and reporting purposes. And of course, it's important to have an executive dashboard with one version of the truth. We've talked a lot about the impact that application changes can have on bots, so it's important to proactively monitor any planned application changes. And if you actually know about these in advance, then what you can do is you can set up a new reprogrammed version of the artifact ahead of time and just make that one live rather than its predecessor when that planned application change occurs. So if you do know when these things are happening, you can actually do it so there's no interruption in RPA service. So we talked a bit about the importance of operations and IT working together. So how do we see their respective roles within the various elements of the RPA lifecycle? So establishing the RPA COE is principally an operations responsibility, but it's important that IT has at least one representative within the Centre of Excellence. You know, this can be an IT head of automation or whatever. And that gets particularly important as you move up Mahesh's maturity scale and automation broadens beyond the initial RPA into a wider range of cognitive technologies. And it's important that IT is involved in technology strategy and tool selection. Yeah, so it needs to be a common strategy, certainly as those automation initiatives get more ambitious. And also operations need IT, absolutely key to set up the server infrastructure, but also in facilitating those awkward areas such as security and bot IDs. Oh, apologies. I've got something come up on my screen that wasn't meant to happen. Give me a second and I'll get rid of it. Right, apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. So IT needs to be represented within RPA governance technology councils. I have heard people say, you know, you don't just need effectively a liaison officer in the RPA COE, but actually you need people involved. You need multiple IT people there. You know, you need directly IT security people there, and so on, and infrastructure people. So, you know, the infrastructure, security, the IDs are absolutely critical. And IT should also be involved in and may take the lead in technology selection. The IT guys clearly have considerable experience that could be brought to bear on technology procurement and negotiations. Again, the assessment and implementation phase should be strongly operations-led, but IT's got a number of critical roles to play in facilitating bot adoption. Indeed, as we've said, actually not having good communication, particularly on things like applications and security, really can lead to major delays in RPA implementation. And the word timely is really important here. So it's not just communication, but actually a lot of the stuff like security, the bot IDs, can take months and months. Certainly if you've got legal, audit, HR, IT, all those guys involved, you need to give it plenty of time. You need to warn people about that well in advance of the RPA initiatives. It's also important that IT identifies aspects of the application landscape that could inhibit bot adoption right up front at the opportunity identification and assessment phase. IT will actually know quirks of particular applications, or if applications have particular quirks that you may not know about in operations. And we have seen people actually having to alter RPA to actually do a character-by-character implementation because of a particular quirk in an ERP system. So you need to know about that up front, and frequently you need to avoid some implementations if that's going to happen. Similarly, the establishment of bot IDs and security frameworks can and has slowed down RPA implementations by months. And these are meant to be quick rollouts after all. So it's important to get IT security involved in establishing the framework for bot IDs, clearing this with legal and audit as far up front as possible. And for each implementation, operations should identify the applications to be accessed by bots, and IT then needs to facilitate access to those applications. Indeed, it may even be necessary, though hopefully not, for IT to make small user interface changes if this proves necessary. At the production stage, bot scheduling, again, should be carried out by operations. It's an operations job, scheduling both bots and scheduling people. It's much, in principle, it's much the same as FTE scheduling, though potentially a lot more real time in practice, and hopefully a lot less hassle in practice. And for monitoring and process reporting, IT will need to assist operations in establishing all the necessary IT infrastructure. And we've already discussed the importance of communication between operations and IT to identify and anticipate any future application changes that might impact the running of operational bots. So those are some thoughts on best practice at the various stages of the RPA lifecycle. What I want to do now is let's summarize with 11 best practice guidelines. Maybe we should have made it a top 10, but it came out at 11. So firstly, and we probably can't say this enough, establishing an RPA Centre of Excellence really is important if the organisation is to scale its RPA and other automations. And this needs to involve the Operational Excellence Group and IT. It really is important to get that central perspective going from the start. Secondly, although organizations are starting to standardize to a certain extent on particular RPA software products, automation is really about a tool set rather than a single tool, with some more suitable than others for particular processes. Mahesh was talking essentially about the front office bots and back office bots earlier. There are, although products are increasingly starting to do both, there are ones that are better at doing front office than others, and ones that are better at doing back office than others. So you need to think about those. And of course, it's all changing again once you start getting into machine learning, cognitive, NLP, and all those things. So think about the process improvement mechanism before embarking on tool selection. Thirdly, another absolutely critical one, certainly in the early days, keep it simple. Start with stable, rule-based, standardized processes with strong SOPs. 4, liaison with applications is critical to understand any planned changes in applications early, and also to get swift access to them for implementation. You really need to make friends with those application owners. 5, be prepared to restack process steps. So as we talked about, grouping people tasks together and grouping bot tasks together. It's fairly modest process re-engineering in the scheme of things, but it can make a huge difference to process turnaround times. Point 6 and 7 are about communication. You do need strong C-level sponsorship, same as anything else. If you want a new initiative to get off the ground, C-level sponsorship, absolutely critical. And you also need strong support from the IT department as well as operations. And strong communication is required throughout the RPA lifecycle. And everyone does need to work together on this. As always, start with the business problem and not the technology, and eliminate unnecessary process steps rather than automating them. Another key principle for the start, go for quick wins. Get an early proof of concept, use the videos from this for communication, show people that it works. Don't worry about being too purist or doing it perfect at this stage. Get the quick wins under your belt. Number 9 really complements suggestion number 3. Avoid volatile and fragmented processes where it's going to be difficult to achieve a smooth implementation. Just keep it simple. And last but not least, because it is absolutely critical, involve IT, HR, and legal teams, and audit probably as well, really early for bot identity and security management. What we found in an awful lot of organizations that this takes much more time than they've actually thought. And this, we know people who are months into RPA implementations who still haven't actually got the bot IDs sorted out. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to hand back to Mahesh.
Hey, thanks, Sean. So I hope those slides were very useful, and with that we are on slide where we are talking about what differentiators we as a LTI bringing onto the table with our experience, what we have delivered till now in the industry. The important one is our domain. I'll start with bullet points so that we get more time for a question answer down the line. So our experience in a domain, let it be a BFSI or manufacturing or healthcare, the experience, understanding of domain, understanding of process really make RPA as a successful journey. That is the one important one. As we are already into RPA journey from long time, we already have lots of accelerators, lots of enablers which can be utilized on day 1 or day 0 when you start the journey. For example, if I start discovery, I have a discovery template ready which can be used on day 0. So those are the accelerators which bring onto the table. We have a huge experience of end-to-end implementation, one of the largest implementation in the world done by LTI. So we carry that experience to deliver such much more successful implementation down the line. We have a right COE and a right group of people who manage RPA. Just to highlight, we are part of a digital initiative inside LTI, and under that we have 1,000+ automation consultants. Many of those are RPA certified, consultant. And the last and not the least is a very interesting pricing model which bring onto the table to give a success to our customers for RPA journey. So with that, I like to close the RPA differentiator and hand it over to the organizer for a question and answer session.
Brilliant, thank you both. That was really interesting, and we've had a flurry of questions come in. So I'd like to begin with the Q&A. If I could field the first question to John, please. How can RPA impact the strategic agility? We all know that organizational agility is the foundation of strategic agility.
Okay, I think in agility, I mean, what people are finding is really, okay, initially you're probably looking at cost savings, efficiency savings, but what comes through really quickly is the impact on turnaround times. And I guess I probably misanswered the question in that the good thing about RPA is you're looking at projects that are probably 2-3 months. So organizations historically, they got to a point where they knew that particular improvements were needed, but there was no way of doing it without putting in a big system, which is going to take them 12 months, and they're going to spend $1 million plus on it. We're now talking about, modest budget, 2 to 3 month projects. You've moved things on, and I think the side with RPA then in doing that is where RPA starts to make a big difference after those efficiency is really in those turnaround times on process, which really starts to then have a big impact on CSAT and NPS scores and things like that with the customer.
Great. And next question, if I could field this to Mahesh. Resistance to change has always been there to any change. However, what awareness or skills will we expect employees to have to be able to adopt RPA effectively?
A very good question. The very important skill that is required is start considering robot as a buddy. If you start pushing robot as a change or someone who is going to replace human, it will not be adopted very good way. If you say that robot is going to assist human into operation, believe me, that will be accepted as a very positive change and will be appreciated by the employee. So yes, a right pitch of the robotic, innovative pitch of the robotic is required for a success.
Great. And for you, John, which types of processes are more suitable for RPA and cognitive automation?
Okay, I mean, I think we covered a fair bit of that. So you really want stable ones, where there aren't going to be application changes going on. You want ones where you actually understand what the process looks like. You actually want one preferably where the scope for the RPA automation to take a bit of a run at the processes, so you don't want anything that's really too fragmented. Having said that, let me try and give you some examples. It's probably going back to how Mahesh answered. So it doesn't, in some ways, those guidelines cut across all processes and industries. Where there has been an awful lot of early RPA adoption was certainly in banking, certainly in insurance, though probably more on the property casualty side, the life side initially. Healthcare payer in the US, massive scope for actually tidying up some of those complex processes. It's been used fairly extensively there. F&A is a big one, purchase to pay, probably a no-brainer. Awful lot in R2R as well. Fair scope in O2C. Seems slightly less in HR so far, but it's certainly starting to come through, and certainly in areas like onboarding and so on.
Great. And Mahesh, what is the maintenance hazard that is foreseen post-RPA implementation, especially where the application has frequent changes in production?
Yeah, so this is very much linked to the point which John was talking about, collaboration with IT. You have to be very well collaborated with IT so that you have a book of work of those applications. You should be proactively maintaining book of work that which application is going to change in which month, which release, so that robotic team is ready with respective changes. That is one. Second, if I think it as a without robot situation today, when something gets changed, it is trained to the operation team today on the floor. They get a training with respect to the new changes, new screen which are going into the production. You just consider that training to be replaced by a robotic changes. So don't get panic because of those changes. Just proactively handle the book of work and correlate those changes with operation training, and you'll be going through very smoothly.
And if I could field another question to you, how do we measure the benefits as we progress in RPA implementation?
So very importantly, typically, we rush into the deploying robot into the production and we forget to measure. That's a very good question. So the dashboards make a big difference here. I guess recently all the versions of latest product of RPA, they have inbuilt dashboard, but please go ahead and enhance your system or custom dashboards. Dashboards should measure how much a robot is getting utilized on that particular days, how many cases are handled by robot on that particular days. That will also put a pressure on operation team to utilize robot more than the human. So utilizing a proper dashboards or proper analytics is a key factor to measure the benefits.
Great, and over to you, John. Is there any preferred approach for RPA execution?
Good question. I guess there are a number of approaches. I guess a key question for a lot of organizations is to what extent you centralize it, or to what extent you do a more of a federal model. And I think there are obviously pros and cons for both, and certainly you need that central model in terms of the COE for actually maintaining all the standards and best practices. You may not want to have those guys doing all the work. You might want to really have them as a facilitating team rather than the total doing team. So, one approach that can work quite well in actually speeding things up and encouraging user adoption is to use more of a federated model, where a lot of the RPA implementation is being done within the business unit or department, because they're bringing their own problems to the table. They're enthusiastic about it. You're not having to overcome the objection of this is being done to us by an outside organization.
Great. And Mahesh, what is meant by end-to-end automation?
So when we say, if I compare this with RDA and RPA as a concept, that was I was talking about end-to-end. When you say end-to-end, for example, if I take a process of a KYC in a bank, then if I want to validate all the KYC document, I will write a robot which will validate all 10 documents and it's done. So that's the end-to-end automation. Whereas before RPA comes into a full-fledged picture, there was a RDA, or there was a macro-based automation where out of 4 or out of 10 documents, maybe 4 will be validated by human, and for remaining 4 he will call a robot to help him. So that's assisted automation. So when I say end-to-end, which means it's a step 2 processing, you give an action to robot will complete it and give it back to you. So that's end-to-end automation.
I think, Mahesh, it's probably fair to say on that there's still that difference between the front office agent assisting use of RPA and the more back office sort of server end-to-end use of RPA. So you can have bots that are actually triggered by an agent and do a particular task for them, and then he triggers them again to do another task. And similarly, you can have bots that are really just running on their own work queue in splendid isolation from the agents.
Great, and I've got about 3 questions here on failure. So I'll ask one, and I'll ask it to both of you, so maybe we'll get some different perspectives. So to start off with, Mahesh, what do you identify as the 3 key areas where RPA after deployment can fail?
So one very important, picking up a wrong process, which means that process which is available with operation team may not be the full view of that process. And once you go into the production, you see lots of variation in that process. That is the first case where you will see RPA failing, because you will not get those many benefits. You have to go for a frequent changes. So that is definitely one. Second, second point, where the cognitive element comes into picture, and you have not factored cognitive elements while doing RPA. For example, we have come across situation where the RPA was written to handle 10 templates, and suddenly if that 10 becomes 100, then RPA will not give you the benefits. Obviously, then you have to append that RPA with a cognitive feature where you really don't have to worry about the templates. So that is the second feature where you have to identify, is it a cognitive or RPA before moving into a deployment. And third, which is very important one, if you cannot measure the benefits, if you start measuring benefits in wrong way, then your RPA may not be sounded as a success. For example, if my robot is really performing well, but if you cannot prove that it is performing well with the dashboards or some numbers, then you will not able to extend that success to the next level. And typically with these three key reasons, RPA get halted.
And partly to build on that, I think what one danger is, and we've said yes, go for quick wins and all the rest of it. Ideally, you want a quick win that's got a little bit of meat to it. There can be a danger that you're doing things that are doing too piecemeal, and is there really enough benefit in there? So I've automated the 10th of a person. Why? Those sorts of areas. So you need it to have a sufficient critical mass to be worth doing, and really building on. I think Mahesh captured it really in that first point. It's really complexity that's going to cause the problems. So if you're suddenly getting hundreds of exceptions when you run the bots rather than one or two, and the process is basically not anything like as well defined as you thought it was, it's much more complex than you thought it was. I think that's probably the major risk factor.
Mahesh, another question for you. We are currently looking at replacing our core back office system. Should we build the requirements for a future RPA program, or implement the core system and then the RPA program?
So I guess you have to define what is tactical and what is strategic for you. We always recommend that don't wait for something to build up and then start RPA, because RPA is the one which can start giving you benefits within few weeks. So you may have to phase out overall the operation into two areas. One where you can immediately start RPA, where you have processes ready, documentation ready. They can pitch in low-hanging fruit, call it as wave one, and processes which require more documentation, more standardization can become a process wave 2, wave 3, and wave 1 benefit which you will get out of low-hanging fruit can fund wave 2 and wave 3. That's a self-funded approach. So you have to really carve out a tactical and strategic phase in your overall horizontal processes and start RPA. But do not wait for RPA to start to get your processes into a shape.
Another question for you. What is the actual risk of RPA being driven by IT at first in a corporation?
So this is very interesting question. This is the debate which typically happens. Is it IT who should manage the project or business? Again, our view is it has to be collaboration. The reason IT may not have a complete business operation view. They may understand the way ERP works, they may understand the way Outlook works, they may understand the work SharePoint works, but they will not able to explain it to a robotic developer or robotic expert how business get benefit out of those applications. So end-to-end process view of the operation scenario, for example, if it is a KYC or if it is a customer onboarding, IT will give only IT perspective. And typically, if you really want to train a robot, you need that a process view or operation view for a successful implementation. So we'll stick to the point where RPA has to be executed by business and IT collaboratively, not a single-handed either by business or either by IT.
Yeah. And I think, John, one argument on that we've seen it deployed a fair bit is that IT interests are really primarily the big strategic systems, the digitalization, really going for the new big scale. The reason that RPA is required at all is really to fix some of those operational issues that are left behind by the major ERP implementations and all the rest of it. So, one way of looking at it is that RPA, certainly its initial days, may change when you get to fully, new digital process models with loads of cognitive and things built in later on. But initially, it's actually tactical. And it's doing things that were falling way off the list of the IT department and are really, too small scale or too low priority for them necessarily to have the bandwidth to fix. So you can look at RPA as it's being, it's being that thing that carries out the things that are the low priority activities for IT.
Mahesh, how do we validate, test the coverage of business scenarios in operation lifecycle as part of RPA?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that is one of the reasons that your RPA can fail if you don't validate that. And what we recommend, one is obviously you have to validate if you have a SOPs for operation. You may have to validate SOPs along with the test coverage. Very interestingly, we have in our methodology we have introduced concept called as TGL and BGL, which is a technical go live and business go live. We have seen that even if you validate lots of documents, you're still going to see the surprises. And so we recommend that you push robot into production, be ready to fail. Don't call it as a business go live, call it as a technical go live. Give some processes, some live cases to a robot, some live scenario to robots, get it matured enough in a couple of weeks, and then call it as a BGL. So one is obviously validate with your SOPs, and once you are done that, please be brave and push robot into production. Call it as a technology go live or alpha go live, whatever you want to phrase it. Face the real scenarios and try to test robot more robustly.
We're drawing to the end of the hour, so just to let everyone know, any questions we don't get to, the panelists will follow up with you offline. To the next question then, Mahesh, are robotic performance dashboards fully automated?
Not really. I don't want to name particular product. Those are pretty good, but those are not automated up to that standard. I guess they are improving. Recently, one of the product has really launched a very good level of performance dashboards, but those are not still, I will say, 100% automated. You still required to write a custom dashboards. But I'm sure down the line, when we talk 3 or 4 months down the line, all these products will launch better version of dashboard which are upcoming in their version. But today what we are seeing, dashboards are not that much automated. It still required a configuration, it still required some manipulation, and it still required some customization to match up your organization requirement.
Brilliant. Well, I really want to thank you both. We've now reached the end of the Q&A section, so I'm just going to give you both for short closing remarks. And John, if I could go to you first, please.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Andrea. I think really just to, we wish you all good luck. RPA really is worth it. It's sort of, it's allowing operations to actually move on from where they've hit a roadblock, and it really is then actually start of that journey. It may not look it at first, but RPA is pretty tactical in the beginning. But as you start to then say, well, let's do a little bit of re-engineering around it. We need to put OCR and NLP in and handle the unstructured data. Oh, by the way, now we'll start to put some machine learning and start to handle some of the judgment-based tasks in it. You suddenly find you've got a totally new digital process model, and you've got much more straight-through processing, than you dreamed was possible a year or two back.
Brilliant. Mahesh, your closing remarks, please.
Yeah, so again, I'm wishing all the best to all newcomers who want to implement RPA, who want to explore RPA. Please go for it. Consider robot as a buddy. Don't get panic with the challenges. There are mitigations available there. The RPA products are improving. The industry is getting improved, and I'm sure you will see the success out of that tunnel. And go for it, and you will see the success. Thank you.
I'd like to thank both of our presenters, LTI, and all of you for listening. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you and goodbye.